Yes. What kind of dog do you have?
He's like a little mix. Here he comes now.
Oh, that's not little.
Oh,
Not too little, at least.
that's a little. He's like 40 pounds.
Okay.
He's a sweetheart.
Yeah.
Um, are you a pet enthusiast, pet owner?
Yeah, but I don't have one right now. Um, it's just like it would be too much with
A lot of work.
walking and like boarding and not
Totally.
right now at least.
Yeah. 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 I mean, he's a handful, so I totally get it.
Yeah.
Um, he's very sweet. Um, how
Yeah.
are you? How's your holiday?
Well, my holiday was very nice. Like some family came down, so it was pretty
Nice.
good. But I
Nice.
like failed to do like any math at all. So like
Oh
I'm
yeah.
very out of practice.
Me too. But I think we've got other things that we had planned to talk about. Can't remember if uh, we had some notes of things to bring up. So maybe we, even though we didn't do any math over the holidays, we can still talk about other stuff.
But something we definitely talk about is how at various times in the past I have avoided like getting too much into
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
computer coding, partly because I can tell it changes my personality.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'd love to hear just like more about that. Like how much coding it takes in order for you to get that sense that you've changed and like what's the direction of that change.
I think it's just, let's see if I can just switch my lighting up, see if that helps.
Yeah.
Um, I would say like maybe I would like start to notice it like within a few weeks or like maybe a month of like doing it semi sporadically, like
Uh-huh.
i.e. not full time.
Uh-huh.
And then like I definitely notice it like if I'm doing it for like, however many months in a row. And it's just I can tell like, just in conversations, like I'm not as fun. I'm a little bit more like serious and like oriented towards like getting specific outcomes.
Wow.
Um, and something that I suspect that I don't know if this is true or not, like
Uh-huh.
if you do it long enough, I wonder if you eventually get better at like switching out of coding mode into like going and
Uh-huh.
having fun with friends mode.
Uh-huh.
Um, but also like, and also one more thing I would say is I don't know how much of this is like tinted by the fact that like I have generally always done study of code alone, either
Uh-huh.
like actually fully on my own or like with some sort of remote boot camp.
Right, right.
So I've never like been in classes and I've never had like, coding friends. So it was like very much a solitary activity, which I'm sure is even worse than like trying to figure out algorithms
Right.
on your own.
Right, right. And maybe the associations you have with it are ones of sort of solo focus and isolation, and so that
Yes.
sort of brings that up. No, that's super interesting. And I think maybe there's a relationship to there was a conversation on Twitter today about bar transfer, which is one of these like um, uh, I don't know, big ideas, big questions, big. At least there's a pretty consistent narrative about far transfer in the research literature, and so the if anybody's tuning in, transfer is the idea that by learning one thing, you get some skills in another thing. And for ideas and like concepts and skills that are close to each other, it's fairly well documented, pretty true. Far transfer is the idea that by like studying one thing, you can gain some kind of skill or familiarity or some kind of detectable effect with something that's far away from that skill. And um, in humans, we mostly find that far transfer like mostly doesn't exist. When they've tried to do some kind of testing, you go and you learn something, um, and they try and test whether or not it affects some other skill that's supposed to have some effect. Mostly, they can't detect any difference. Um, so the like consensus wisdom is like far transfer doesn't exist. It's not. It's like sort of a myth. And the question that I think a lot of our intuition raises is like with experiences like yours, where you do some coding and then it changes how you like interact with everything in your life and how you feel day to day and who you think you are. It's like, boy, it seems like there's a real effect there, and it's got to be some kind of bar transfer, at least in some sense. Um, so what?
Maybe there's like only like negative far transfer.
Maybe maybe learning to code only hurts your social skills, and um, yeah, I guess that maybe there's a lot of I don't know, kind of to me a little fluffy like algorithms to live by stuff
Uh-huh.
that's like I don't know. People don't typically like use effectively these like algorithmic tools that we learn in math or computer science study to like make decisions about their grocery list or whatever. Um, but I don't know. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm missing
Yeah.
this whole thing.
And one thing that like because I haven't like read much of this literature on like
Uh-huh.
far transfer, um I'm trusting everybody else to have like read the papers and assuming like that they're like solid
Uh-huh.
enough. And one reason why I suspect why I'm gonna currently plan on agreeing with them
Uh-huh.
is that the this idea of like having like project-based learning where the idea is to like paraphrase it like you give kids sort of like the ingredients of an experiment or the ingredients of a project and then they're
Uh-huh.
supposed to somehow put together the initial discovery on their own and the idea is like if they have to put it together on their own that makes it more likely that they're going to remember it in the future.
Uh-huh.
And my understanding is what actually happens is maybe if you're lucky, some of the really smart kids will grab onto it, but everybody else will be very confused and maybe even develop like some incorrect assumptions
Yeah.
because they take those ingredients or what they take what they think the
Mhm.
teacher told them, and then they make up something completely new that's
Yeah.
not true because there's this other constraint out in the real world that they don't have to deal with because it's not in everything that was handed to them, and then they're just like confused and very frustrated.
Yeah, no, I think that tie into to project-based learning. What you described also sort of applies to something like inquiry-based learning or discovery learning. The terms end up getting sort of
Oh yeah,
used.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a little mushy, like where the border is, the boundary would
That's a good point.
be
That's a good
drawn
point.
by different people in different places. But I think that I just like on the face of it, sort of agree in general that like project-based learning. It tends to fail like in like one of two ways. The one that you described is like, well, some people just get left behind because things are underspecified. The other way is like, well, it can be overspecified, and then you end up just following the steps, and um, it's it's like, well, it's not really a project if you're just
Mhm.
following the steps. You're sort of just going through the motions, and um, yeah, I don't know if there's like a good way around that. If it's a real enough project for you to be able to fail, then many kids or learners, whatever student you have, they will fail, um, and that failure is unlikely to be instructive in the way that you desire. A lot of people learn things from projects, but not necessarily the thing that they're supposed to learn.
Yeah,
So sometimes the thing that you learn is, oh my gosh, projects are so hard, or oh my gosh, working on teams is terrible, or
yeah,
or you learn some things that are like adjacent to the work that you're doing, like, oh, here's how you set up a project, and you don't actually learn the like meat of the thing that
yeah.
it's actually about. Sometimes some of those things are interesting, but often they're like an ineffective way to get at the skill that you're purportedly trying to learn via the project.
Yeah. So now, like a question that's like coming up in my mind is how do you like sort of not necessarily thread the needle because like it's very fairly tractable, I would think.
Uh-huh.
But like when I was learning how to code, some of the
Mhm.
very effective things were to like work on a project for a few hours. So And now I'm wondering like what's the difference between like sort of like inquiry-based learning
Mhm.
versus like trying to apply multiple skills at once. And but like you said, it's sort of a gradient. So it's like
Mhm.
which one is which one? It's hard to say.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's like the people who are arguing in favor of project-based learning would say something like, oh, well, that teamwork skill that you're supposed to learn through this project, that's an outcome. Or like all of that setup, that scaffolding that you sort of had to do for yourself to get the project off the ground. It's like, that's an outcome. That's actually what the point of the project was to do this other thing, not just the quote unquote, work of the project itself, not just that
Right.
content. Also, all this other stuff. And it's like to some extent, I think that's fair. It's like, how are you going to learn teamwork without working on a team to solve some problem? So I think like if that is something that is a goal, or like how, you have to learn how to set up whatever a coding environment or whatever the setup stuff is you need for some other project. It's not crazy to think that those outcomes are meaningful, but if the point is to learn like some topic, then the the project is going to force you to do all this other stuff. That's like,
Yeah.
well, that's not what the content was. Um,
Yeah.
so if you have a different kind of curriculum that focuses just on that thing, then you learn that thing more effectively, and don't learn the rest of this stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Uh, like we've sort of meandered away from these ideas of like far transfer and coding changing your personality into like project-based learning, um, and like
Yeah.
sort of like curriculum design, searching for a way to try and tie things back together.
Oh, we don't have to do that. Yeah. Um, like let's see if I can like say this in a way that makes any sense at all.
Sure.
Because like if I'm like looking at Math Academy and like thinking about like all the very specific things that they give you,
Mhm.
and I've like started thinking about like what if we did something similar like with Spanish or like with computer coding, and I've sort of wondered why this hasn't happened in like
Mhm.
in a way that like has taken off for like our particular internet social circle.
Mhm.
And something that I'm trying to think is that like many learners, they do a lot of scaffolding sort of like themselves. And the amount of work to like go back and do all that scaffolding for the next person is like quite substantial. Um, and
Yeah, that
but
could.
like sort of I'm sort of wrapping my mind more around like why certain things haven't taken off, at least not yet.
So it's like I think I'm gonna disagree again that there's no like math things that have taken off, or sorry, like coding things that are similar to Math Academy in style or in spirit that have taken off. It's like those things definitely exist.
Yeah.
Have you done execute program?
Ice
Uh,
Cube?
execute program.
Oh no, I haven't heard of that.
This is Gary Bernhardt's like it's I don't know, it's great. I really like it. It's a code learning, but it's got little um, uh, the lessons are driven by an interaction. So you sort of reveal the concepts step by step with something that you have to engage with. There's a SRS algorithm underneath it. You have to do a bunch of practice and sort of remember the contents of the lessons themselves. It's got some representation of a concept graph and some sort of path through the lessons. That's I think if you have engaged with the Math Academy stuff, you'll be like, oh yeah, this is really familiar. We've got a lot of the same ideas. You might find that interesting.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
and
this is very cool, and I whether we not to be too obnoxious,
uh-huh,
but like last time that we talked about this,
uh-huh.
and I raised the same thing. The example you gave me was like a different product, but that
Oh
had
yeah,
like
Code
been bought
Academy. Yeah.
out.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to mention them because, yeah, because Code Academy, because, um, and now, like I'm still wondering why they're not like more popular. Um,
You wonder whether or not more popular in our corner of Twitter?
yes,
It's just like
but like
there's
that's sort of like a challenge because like like for example, like Free Code Camp is like very popular. Um,
yeah, I mean, Free Code Camp is like very popular. They're whatever. YouTube has 1 million subscribers. It's like I don't think that they're that big on like the same Twitter that Math Academy is like super
yeah,
popular.
exactly.
But I think it's like the same way that like General Assembly was always much bigger than Lambda School, and Lambda School had a much bigger Twitter presence because like there's some
Hmm.
idiosyncrasies to Twitter and to the like particular companies and founders and their tweeting. It's like the Skycax and the other what's his handle, the Math Ninja guy.
Yeah,
They tweet a lot and they tweet pretty good. It's like that is probably why they're popular on Twitter. Austin is a prolific and notoriously excellent Twitter user, and it's sort of independent of the popularity of the boot camp. Not entirely, but it's like
yeah, yeah.
they're just different things. Um,
Okay.
like Gary Bernhardt, very popular on the internet, and then like I don't know, he's probably does fine on Twitter, I
Yeah.
assume.
Uh, who is that? Who's Gary Bernhardt?
Oh, he's like a sort of long time online code educator, and I don't know. You've probably seen that WAT JavaScript talk that he's given. Um, if you haven't, it's pretty funny. It's a little old now, but
Okay.
he's got a few like conference talks that I think are pretty. They stand the test of time pretty well. I think the
Okay.
Birth and Death of JavaScript is really good. The WAT talk. He's organized a conference. Yeah, I don't know. Online code person. Destroy All Software was a video production company that he ran that did sort of early. I actually still think that they're like really top notch videos, but this was
Yeah.
like back
Was
in
it Destroy All?
software.
Okay.
They're very tightly produced in the way that I think a lot of like modern sort of like Twitch stream, YouTube software developers like mostly miss.
Yeah.
Um, it's like they're sort of doing this like very unfiltered live stream of their coding and not a like tightly
Yeah.
edited like here's exactly the thing that I'm trying to focus and show you um,
Yeah.
with some sort of theory of like here's the point of this video. So anyway, um, I like the guy. XU program seems like the idea that you've got about like, hey, we could use this for teaching other things, executed pretty well.
Yeah. Excellent. I'm excited for that. I'm gonna dig into it a little bit and see what happens.
Yeah, there's lots of lessons.
Yeah.
So that was okay. So one was this you had this thesis that like what if why hasn't one of these things become popular in our Twitter? One is like
Yeah.
um,
And also like hopefully I'm not indexing on Twitter too much, but
uh,
also just like in general, like why has none of these like for example, like everybody knows about Harvard.
mhm,
These other programs less so.
right. Why is
Part of that
XG
is
program
like
a lot smaller than Coursera or Udemy or all these other places
yeah,
we
yeah, and it's also like tricky to like sort out like size versus like notoriety.
yeah
Um, and also like something else that's floating on around in the back of my head is that one post from another like education Twitter guy. He
uh,
basically wrote something along the lines of boot camps can't have product market fits. They only have sort of like pathway fit in terms of like, taking someone from like being an adult to being employed as a coder. And so like that's what it's his take on the subject. And then another thing that I tweeted recently that I'm still wondering about is like, why don't colleges have agglomeration effects?
Yeah.
But
Um,
these all might be poorly formed questions. Who knows?
yeah. No, I think that these are related. So to take that last one first, why don't colleges tend to have agglomeration effects? And I think this is like a deeply interesting question. I think there are a couple answers. One is like, well, they could, but they're set up to mostly not, mostly because they sort of bottleneck themselves around this like physical size of classroom, physical size of campus constraint, um, and that's pretty real. Um, the like evidence that you might point at to say like, oh, you could have agglomeration effects or some of these big online programs. So ASU, uh, Maryland Global Campus, WGU, SNU, all these big. I mean, there's some really big programs that seem to have some agglomeration effects, but um, in those programs, you see this thing where they've scaled up and they probably got some good like scaling up of operations and maybe some returns to some of their marketing and branding that are like better than their peers. But it doesn't seem like the presence of lots and lots of education graduates from those programs out in the world like has like redounded to their benefit, whereas like Harvard has whatever a couple centuries of their graduates going on to like have power in all the
Yeah, yeah.
institutions. So maybe it's just like we've just done the selection effect really strong. We're really good at filtering and placing people into the halls of power, and uh, that's our niche. We're not going to change. So
Yeah.
yeah, maybe I don't know. That's a attempt at a partial answer.
Okay.
Um, the other thing you brought up was this. I it sounds like a thing that Brian Tobel would say, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
that's the guy. I forgot his name.
Um, yeah, I worked with Brian and really like Brian. So it's it's like, oh yeah, no, I know that. That sounds like Brian. Um, but uh, I think this is like a um, there's like a couple dimensions to it. It's like
Okay.
uh, uh, boot camp is like it's not a traditional school. It's sort of like part of its like brand, part of the premise. And what it means is like it has to be targeting a gap in the labor market. And what that implies is that it can sort of only have product market fit in this like temporary fashion. Because as soon as that labor market, those are sort of like a things that happen in transition. They can't you can't have like a stable gap in the labor market forever. Um, I'm sure that there's some example that proves it wrong, but um, I think he's got some other like sort of nuances to that point. Um, we can probably link the
Yeah.
thing. I've got it. I've got the full post in the chat, but some of it is like um, schools have to take students from their starting point to their destination, which is it like
Yeah.
sounds really obvious, but it means that like if students are at different starting points, you have to like apply a big filter to make sure you're picking the right students who are at the starting point that your school is designed to serve, which is a big deal. It's like schools don't serve everyone. That's sort of like one of the big
Yeah.
parts of this premise is boot camps are really designed to work with students who are like at this point and need to get to this point. And if you try and design to like take anybody from any point, it's like, well, now you no longer have like one coherent product. You have like whatever, 50 different products and they don't work that good.
Yeah.
Uh, so I don't know. Um, I keep losing we've got a few different threads that are going and I keep losing track of what that was where
Yeah.
we got to there from.
Well, this is good because like at least I know that like when I am thinking about education,
Uh-huh.
it's a huge total mess. And I'm not like deluding myself into thinking, oh, this is like a very clear thesis that I have right here.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair that's a good conclusion to draw. Um, so Okay, I had one other thing to say. You had said that this Math Academy thing. I mean, why hasn't it, it seems like a mystery? Why hasn't something like this taken off in other domains? And I think one thing that you could say is that math is perhaps uniquely among things that we can teach a field that has like a really well defined um, scope, particularly at the sort of the early years of math. We like know pretty well what it is that we want people to be able to do, and it's really really useful. It's really really general, and so it's if you figure out one way to teach it really really well, it does actually apply to everyone in a way that like for the most part boot camps don't really
Yeah.
do. So if you look at that execute program, it's like it's really narrow, like um, who it's for. So each of the
Who
courses
would
is
you
like
who would you say that it's for?
it is like it's for professional programmers who want to develop fingertip memory for specific like programming skills that they're bound to encounter time and time again. So it's like that narrows the market down quite a bit. So it's like, oh, you've used lots of regular expressions. You already have the context for like why these are important, and you just need to remember what all of the different little regex syntaxes are, so that you can write them without pulling up the cheat sheet. Um,
Yeah.
and you want to be able to do that quickly. It's like, okay, that's where you're going. You're going from familiar with and have worked with regexes to can apply regexes and like write them without looking at a reference, because it's just like, yeah, I know what the different character classes would look like, how to produce them. Um, that's a pretty narrow set of people. Like all of the people who need to learn algebra is just like a much broader. It's like
Yeah.
that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Maybe that's another answer for like why this doesn't seem like it's caught hold, is because um, there are lots of these little instances, but you have to sort of spin up that sort of micro class for every different like narrow skill that you could want somebody to get to, and particularly as you get further in different fields, those fields like those little narrow courses proliferate. It's like, oh my God, there's a million little skills like that that you could develop
Yeah.
to that level of detail, but it's like for the most part, it's only a couple hundred people who really have that as like the relevant thing.
Yeah. And I'm just writing down a reminder that like many courses you're like taking students from point A to point B, and
Mhm.
everybody that point A is like a very specific starting point, and not everybody is there.
Mhm. So that's another potential explanation for why we haven't seen like lots of other schools that bring that very like um, specific kind of pedagogy to
Yeah.
market.
Yeah. And like if you take that challenge and you sort of like layer on all like, what is education for,
Uh-huh.
babysitting, signaling, then it like starts to make a little bit more sense.
Yes. Yes. Yes, it does. uh,
Yeah. Sad. Okay.
yeah, certainly.
Unfortunately, I need to hop off
Yeah.
in a little bit. Is there anything else like we want to like hit on or like any last notes for today?
No, I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious what other if there's other effects that we notice in our lives. I'd have to think about it some
Like
like
for like doing coding and
does it change my personality?
yeah,
Is it coding that does this, or is it something else that changes my personality? If I get really immersed in some book, does that do that to me? I don't know.
maybe. Yeah. Excellent. Rob, thank you for chatting, and I'll talk with you next time.
All right, Tim. Great to see you.
See you then. Bye.
Bye.